We would like also to see early elections in Thailand. The EU must take up a more active role and act as a mediator. We have to make sure that there is no escalation and encourage constructive discussion. So, Commissioner, let's please have confidence in our ability to help while Thailand suffers.
1.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, President. I too would like to express solidarity vis-à-vis the families of Thailand nationals who've been the victims of the situation. And the situation is particularly difficult in that there's no prospect of a conflict. There have been many people killed and injured, and this current state of affairs cannot be accepted. Resorting to force and censorship, the broadcasting of programs which have been vetted by government, and only those programs, all of these matters simply cannot be accepted, and it is therefore up to us to condemn this violence vis-à-vis civilians, and to ask that people who've been arrested be released, and that a proper investigation be carried out. All of this simply makes matters worse. More and more hatred is fostered among the ranks of the opposition. These demonstrations could easily lead to civil war, and I think that the international organizations and the UN should intervene on time to avoid the escalation of violence and to act as a mediator in order to establish a dialogue between the government and the opposition. This is the only peaceful solution. Thank you.
And Mr. Higgins for 1 minute, please.
Thank you, President. I condemn the brutal repression by the Thai government and state against protesters in Bangkok and elsewhere in Thailand. Despite propaganda that these were terrorists, they were in fact in the main impoverished farmers from the north and around Bangkok, sections of the urban working class, and also their families, who saw their protest as a struggle against the enormous poverty and hardship that they suffer. Unfortunately, these oppressed people look to the billionaire and former Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra for a solution. Despite some populist measures against poverty when he was in government, Mr. Thaksin represents the capitalist elite and deceives the masses. On the other hand, there is the current Prime Minister Abhisit and his party, which represent other sections of the elite. I think the poor rural masses and the urban working class in Thailand urgently need their own independent organisation to fight for their rights. And I hope that the next mobilisation in Thailand might be a united struggle of workers, poor farmers, students and youth, dedicated to overthrow all corrupt elites and bring the major wealth of Thailand into public ownership and democratic control in a socialist Thailand, to transform the lives of its people and fight for the rights also of all minorities. Thank you, President.
Now Mrs. McAvoy for 1 minute, please.
Thank you. I condemn the use of bullets on protesters in Thailand. Dozens of people died, hundreds were injured. As reported by Amnesty International, eyewitness accounts and video recordings show clearly that the military is firing live rounds at unarmed people who pose no threat whatsoever to the soldiers or to others. Among the dead, there are medical doctors and children. Thai soldiers must stop firing. Violence against protesters cannot lead and will not lead to a democratic solution. The government must be aware that crushing the protesters may clear the streets for now, but will not solve the problem which brought the people on the street. And before anything else comes the human life. So, stop the fire.
Thank you. We now move to the Catch the Eye part of the debate, and again I'm having to make some choices. Firstly, Mr. Mikolasic.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Vážená pani predsednička, vážené kolegyne, vážení kolegovia, demonštrácie v Thajsku žiaľ pretrvávajú už niekoľko civilné obyvateľstvo, ktoré je priamo...
Ladies and gentlemen, this situation has been going on for a number of weeks now, and unfortunately it's the population at large who are suffering from the bloody confrontations between demonstrators and the army. I'd therefore like express my sympathies to the families of those who have died in these confrontations. I'd like to call on both sides to turn their backs on violence before more blood is shed. I'd like to see a constructive dialogue aimed at resolving the conflict peacefully. I'd also call on the Thai government to avoid putting in place measures that might violate human rights.
Vážená pani predsedajúca, vážený pán komisár, ctené kolegyne, kolegovia, politický konflikt v Thajsku
Ladies and gentlemen,
vážnych občianskych nepokojov, ktorých výsledkom je po zákroku represívnych orgánov smrť mnohých
the
protestujúcich.
situation
Je odsúdeniahodné, ak štátna moc
and the conflict has claimed many lives, and I have to condemn the use of force by the authorities, use of force against their own people. Commissioner, it's now necessary for the Commission to exert pressure on both sides in order to resolve this dispute, and that the conflict between the leaders on both sides don't lead to suffering in the population at large.
Mr. Silvestris.
Signor Commissario, fermare le armi e rimuovere
Commissioner,
le censure, io penso che sia
to
questa
do away with censorship and stop people using arms, these are the two things which we can do. We've got to be very determined and consistent. These are values which cannot be given up by this Parliament, and I think that the Commission should try to ensure that this is possible. In a climate similar to that of civil war, which is the climate reigning in Thailand, a climate in which a return to democracy, thanks to free elections, which are not yet certain, all of this requires that people be aware of the fact that the international community does feel that it has links with the population of Thailand. Now, if the international community is to be involved, one important factor is information, which is why the state of emergency cannot be a veiled type of censorship. Internet information must be possible. The international community must be aware of what is happening in Thailand, because the international community in this way can help the country move towards democracy. Thank you.
Commissioner, please.
Madame la Présidente,
President, members of the House, Thailand is going through a very tragic period in its history. The country is well known for being an economically dynamic country, and yet it is affected by this very profound crisis, and this is why a solution has to be found to this crisis. A large part of the population seems to have lost confidence in the institutions governing the country, and the government has difficulties also in dealing with the current situation. As a result of all of this, there's a great feeling of fragility, which has led to violence and violations of fundamental rights and human rights. And all of this affects the future of the country. The European Union regrets the fact, and indeed deplores the fact that humans have been killed. Fabio Polinghi, the Italian journalist, was killed yesterday during clashes between the demonstrators and the military. Now, no political state of affairs can justify this sort of situation. Now, the High Representative has already said on a number of occasions that self-restraint is necessary. And a state of emergency cannot lead to disproportionate measures being taken in terms of the restrictions of individuals' rights. And so as to avoid any further deterioration of the situation, it is essential that negotiations resume. The Commission has taken note